This is the Gospel Revolution.
Since you're knocking on the door, you're begging to come in, yeah. Unaware that all the while love's been knocking from within. You are the love you see, a perfect yet unique, righteous, holy.
Here's the founder and president of the Gospel Revolution, Michael Lilborn Williams.
Hello, Daniel Thomas Rouse. It is an honor and a privilege to be in your house on my camera this day.
Wow. Let me just bask in that glory.
I'm sure your house just filled with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir.
Well, I'm honored to have you here.
Well, yes. What else can I say? And okay, for you guys that are hitting the fast forward button, go ahead.
Yeah, just give us a few minutes here.
Yeah, we'll have fun while you're gone. You're stuck in the muds. See, I wouldn't say that if I knew that they hadn't already hit fast forward.
Yeah,
but now we can talk about it. No, it's good to see you, Daniel. Your presence is acknowledged here also. I'm sorry, it's a thing right now. I don't know.
Well, and I suppose we should let everyone listening know that we're honored to be a part of your home, your car, your earbud, wherever you may be listening.
Your what?
Earbud? Little thing?
Earbud. Oh, okay. I'm not going to tell you what I think. That's like, okay, we're going to that level, are we? So
apparently you are.
Well, at least ready to be surprised by it. Yeah, goodness. Thank you guys for inviting us into your home. And we've got a lot to talk about today. So enough of this tomfoolery, Daniel Thomas Rouse.
Yeah, we should get right down to business because it is Pledge Drive. We kicked off Pledge Drive last week.
When it comes to money, nothing comes before that. Oh, no, wait. Take that out, okay?
No.
Mm-hmm. There's occasions where this gentleman I used to know, his hand just comes right out of the grave, grabs me by the throat.
But yes, we have kicked off our summer pledge drive, and this is the quarterly pledge drive that we address you, our listeners, and we ask you to support. As the man who lives in the grave now has just been referred to, Don Beres Bartlett, he always used to say that we run a value for value system here at the Gospel Revolution, that if you find value in what you're hearing, now you can exclude the first couple minutes of our broadcast if you'd like.
No value at all.
But if you do find value in the rest of it, we ask that you put a little value back into it, because if you find value, it may help someone else that we can reach. And you can help us reach more and more people with your financial support.
Yes, thank you. And I would like to make one minor correction that I don't think that you meant that Don Bartlett lives in the grave right now. All right. A small correction to whatever anybody wants it to be. But we don't think he's living in the grave right now. But if he's reaching out and grabbing my throat, I guess we are saying, well.
Well, you can go to www.gospelrevolution.com and hit the donate button. Also, Jeff is standing by during the pledge drive, happily ready to receive your pledge, your donation. You can call him at 321-220-4373. Again, that's 321-220-4373.
Yes, indeed. Thank you guys for helping. I was thinking about, what do we really need to come in this pledge drive? And we really need a minimum of 12,000 to come in. Now, 12,000 is not a lot of bucks. We don't operate a high flying budget, but we still do not have enough monthlies coming in to carry us all the way through the year. So these pledge drives fill in those potholes. And I hate to say that because most people all know, you're supposed to give to something that's successful. Well, we are successful, but what we're successful in has nothing to do with where we are financially. And I have to tell you that financially, the ministry really is in a better condition than it has ever been in, because I determined just a few years ago that I was going to build a foundation for this ministry financially to where that at whatever point that I am exiting this, and Daniel and others who are taking over, that we're not going to turn over a broke organization to. I'll decide on that more thoroughly right before I die. So. It depends on whether I want to go to the Bahamas or something. Anyway. But we have that secured and to the side. And for all of my real dear friends out there who have tried to help me manage the funds, and I've listened to all of you, I did listen, and we do have a nothing substantial by any means, but enough set aside to where that, we're not going to have to have the electricity turned off and back on again. But right now, on the budget that we are set on, like I say, we do not have enough coming in without having to go and start digging. And I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to leave this ministry in a position to where it's struggling. Just that's not going to happen. And for it not to happen, for me to make such a dogged assertion of a surety, I wonder if that's ever been said on there. You're going to have to help me. So to do that, to keep us on budget, and to be able to smooth this out, pledge drive to pledge drive right now is, like I said, it's filling in for that which is not coming in during the regular monthly upkeep that you guys are so wonderful at doing. So 12,000 is the opening bid. Do I hear 13,000?
And also, it's a good opportunity if you are not a monthly partner to consider that. That perhaps there would be an amount every month that you could set aside to help us continue the work that we're doing.
Yes. So both are really good. We the reason that we're only asking for 12,000 is because that we of the people who do their monthly tribute to Mike Williams Ministries and the Gospel Revolution, and you guys are all so faithful. We have some that go through PayPal, and that's always there. Those funds get transferred to Mike Williams Ministries each month. And also, I want to tell you that from PayPal, because it's convenient there, if there are cases where that if we have a benevolent thing that we need to meet, or somebody has a need that it's within our grasp to be able to help them, occasionally not very often at all, on occasion, we'll do that. So let me tell you something that we've done. I decided not to tell you this until after we done did it.
Done did it.
I know that's been said on Mike, because I live in Tennessee, and we done did it a lot. And that is that we have not going to, it's paid for. We have built Moses and Elizabeth Gata a new home.
Aw, awesome.
Yeah. I didn't even tell you about that, or did I?
You mentioned it in passing once.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's all I knew.
But nothing detail. I'm just, it was just a few $1,000s. It was not a great deal. They built everything themselves, and they had the piece of land. It was really weird because that when his mother died, and the thing that's been difficult for us is to understand the difference in cultures.
Yeah.
And there's been things that we've tried and they just failed, but they've kept me informed. But I did let them know that we will not be able to invest in a business venture there anymore because everything's against them.
Mm-hmm.
And number one, they are considered to be in a certain tribal strata or economic strata that they are not allowed to get out of. Your own people will knock you back down if you try to get out of that. And so it seems that the only ones that are able to get out of that are people who claim to be preachers, and then all the poor people give their money to the preachers. It's just a terrible environment, and a lot of the African mindset. We like I say, I have learned over the decades more and more about it, but it's very different. So what happened was that this last business, which was actually prosperous for them, but they trusted someone that they knew with their business and their investment in that business, which was buying actually used clothes from cargo containers and them set up a store and selling them there. And they had like 2 stores open.
Wow.
And one person, but behind their back, just literally robbed them blind.
Mm.
Now, that was a fault on their part. They should not have let that happen. But again, I don't know how people are expected to do things like that. You just never give here. You would never give somebody, well, people do it and they lose everything whenever they do give somebody too much access without verification to the books, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So that fell through for them, and they were back to eating one meal a day. What happened is that they moved in. His mother did pass away, and so they were staying in her hut at the village, but the village would not allow that for some reason. You can't come in and move into your dead parents' dwelling.
Mm.
That's a taboo. You can't do that. However, she did own the land in the village, and they did get that, and so they needed a home. So now they have a permanent home for the first time in their lives because they rented and they did whatever they could do to be able to try to get their business started. I want you to know that that little house, and we're going to post the pictures of it on Facebook so you can see it, and on the website. And it's just a very pretty little place. I'm thrilled with it. And I want you to see what we did in our benevolence fund to be able to help these guys get on their feet. Moses still shares the gospel, just like he always has. And the one thing that has been always been difficult where Moses is concerned is he's a very quiet, very reserved man, and he doesn't talk a lot about what he does.
Mm.
But that's what we've always needed, and that's what we've not gotten a very big amount of. Now, if we ask, I get all these proofs, and yes, we're doing this, and here's that, and this is documented, and here's the pictures of the meeting and this and that and the other, but to volunteer it, he just doesn't. And I think it's just a cultural difference that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
I believe in Moses and his family. I wouldn't still be doing this, but we do not give them funds. I've let them know that they have to, whatever it takes for them to live, they've got to make that themselves there. But with this fall on their face type thing, they needed some help, and they are spreading the gospel in Kenya. And so we did build them this little house. And I want you guys to be excited that you were able to do that. If I should have told you we were doing it, forgive me. But I just thought I would rather work this out with the finances that we have and then let you know when it's done. And it is finished.
It is finished. Sounds like a song.
Gospel in me. I got the gospel revolution.
Michael, I have been kind of buzzing from our last conversation here last week about love. And of course, we were asked to critique Kenneth E. Hagin, someone who, as I was growing up, I had great respect for. I attended his school, and he had done a teaching about love. And I think the title of it was Love Your Way to Victory. And so we had looked at that last week, and it happened to fit right in with what we were examining through the commandments and teachings of Christ.
Mhm.
And that being on loving the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And the second is like it, that you would love your neighbor as you love yourself. And Jesus made the statement that on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets.
Mhm.
And Hagin had gone in to say that Jesus left us a new commandment, and he put a new commandment in our heart, and that is that we should love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And so we walked through that a little bit to see what end it came to. And we found some very interesting things and learned a lot. And there were a few items that we didn't get to, which is why we wanted to come back to it today. But a couple things that I learned last week, namely, was when Paul talks about love in his epistles and his authentic writings, it's always about Christ's love, what he did, and the love that he had towards us, and the love that he had towards the Father and the Father towards him. But then as you get into the pseudographical writings or writings that come from Peter, James, and John, the majority of the focus switches to the love that we have for one another. And in that love, that we can fulfill the law and the prophets. And which makes us question, well, what did the love of Christ do? Didn't the love of Christ fulfill the law and the prophets? Is there something left undone? And that is what it seems that the pseudographical writers and Peter, James, and John seem to think, along with many other topics that we have learned over the years, is that Christ left the love walk, the commandment to love, that he left that alone and unfinished. And he left us with that some sort of supernatural ability to be able to love the way that God loves. And again, diminishing the work of the cross.
Yes, and this has been something that the Gospel Revolution and myself, I started trying to examine this because of the terminology of the fulfillment of the law, and that's what we do. We teach about the fulfillment of the law, and of course, this has exploded around the world now to people trying to come up with their own definition of what that actually means,
right?
Because they've been confronted with it, and it has been this ministry. I have to let you know, it has been this ministry that has brought this to the forefront in the last 50 years, bringing this issue of that the law has been fulfilled, because it has been a dismissed subject. It got dismissed summarily by preachers quoting Jesus saying, "I did not come to destroy the law." Bam. Okay, so let's skip that and let's go on to other things. We know that the law is not destroyed. I remember 40 years ago, a gathering of pastors from Louisiana that decided to meet me at the little lounge and conference area at the hotel I was staying in. And we were all gathered around this table, and that was there, and so that it was peaceful. I didn't have any reason to think that it was by any means hostile. In that go around, that's what they were there to do, was to dismiss this teaching that I was doing about the law having been fulfilled.
Mm.
Something that one of the pastors said basically made the blood of Christ the same as the blood of a bull and a goat. And I remember I came to my feet. I'm not a come to my feet type of guy, although at 6'6", I should make that as a part of my protocol when in a debate, because people seem to think that height gives you the advantage. But I came to my feet and I said, "How dare you?" and fill in the blanks. And that's kind of where that whole little conference left off. And they, of course, wrote me off as a heretic, announced it throughout the churches of Louisiana that they had confronted me and I was unrepenting and blah, blah, blah. So just another little snapshot in the middle of gospel revolution over the last decades.
Well, I wonder if one of those pastors is the one responsible for posting the 10 Commandments in all the schoolhouses now.
Well, isn't that strange? I just realized now that that's how big of an issue this became 40 years ago in Louisiana. Is now the whole Senate has passed, we're going to put the 10 Commandments on the walls of every school. So I am directly responsible for that reaction. I have no clue. I can just tell you that it was Louisiana, and yes, the pastors of Louisiana announced me and said we're sticking with the law, and told me where to stick everything else I had to say.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah, oddly enough, here we are 40 years later, and they've passed a law to enshrine the 10 Commandments. I'd say they still don't like me.
Maybe a bit offended.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, because this issue of love is tied to law, it had to be examined.
Mm-hmm.
Because the statements are, as you have given your drapery hanging comparison to all the law hanging from this. We've used the hinges, we've used whatever you want to use, that one thing holds it all together. Or one thing holds all things up. And it is, since the law is fulfilled, the only conclusion you can come to, unless you're going to enshrine it on the walls of the school, is to understand that Christ himself is the one whose love fulfilled all of those commandments,
Mm-hmm.
plus hundreds of others.
Yeah.
So, you see, when people start thinking that you have to publish the 10 Commandments to get a moral society, they're just wrong. I mean, there's cultures around the world who know nothing about any of God's commandments, who can actually claim a better standard of treating each other better than societies who thoroughly know the 10 Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
Believe me, go through the history of Europe, and they all knew the 10 Commandments. And all of them murdered and slaughtered each other. The Catholics knew the 10 Commandments as they burned at stake and disemboweled and quartered. And the Protestants knew that when they burned at stake, disemboweled and quartered. Believe me, they all knew the 10 Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
So let's not go brain dead here all of a sudden about what the knowledge of the 10 Commandments in societies has and has not done. It just turns out that once you turn to the law, you're going to become cruel and unkind to groups of people. You're not going to become cruel. It's not that you become easy on crime or you become more gentle toward people and hard on crime. You become hard on people. And you really, it's where people begin. What else are they going to do except use that to judge each other? This knowledge that the law was fulfilled by love. Because if you take all the commandments, if love is instituted, then the commandment would have never been broken in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the mentality that is trying to be presented, is that if you loved, you would never have broken this commandment.
Right.
And that's understandable. This fulfillment of these laws is Jesus has brought it down to understanding these terms of loving. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, all your might. And to equally then love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm.
Now, what does that mean? Well, the only thing that we can do, folks, is either just come up with our own prognostications, our own views, our own justifications, or we can go to the scriptures and see what we can actually find. What doth it saith, And so with that in mind, where do we go?
Well, we kind of teased everyone last week as we were leaving and said that as we were looking through love, specifically the term agape, we discovered a couple things. We always taught, I wrote a book on it, and Kenneth Hagin shared it in his message, that agape love is the God kind of love.
Yeah. Unconditional love.
Yep, it is unconditional. But as we were going through the verses that use the word agape, and so to put it up front here, there's two words. There's agape and agapeo. One is a noun, agape is the noun, and agapeo is the verb.
Yes.
So those are the words that we looked at and going through, and I think there was about 100, a little over 100 on each one. The other word that's used for love in the Bible is phileo, and that's used, I think I looked it up, 21 times, or in 21 verses, used 25 times in 21 verses. And that's often translated as brotherly type of love. And as we started examining this agape and agapeo, it was quite evident, Michael, that this really isn't the God kind of love. Because you have in it, for example, I'll give you a verse that uses this word, that men loved darkness rather than light. Men agape'd darkness. Men loved mammon, money, rather than God. And you fill in the blank. Men love their sin. Men love the world. It talks about how men love these things that God would never love, and in a way that God would never love them. And so that really disproves that point, Michael, that agape is the God kind of love. And I'm just still in shock.
Well, it is shocking. And what about soup, Daniel? Can you love soup?
Soup? Yeah. You can love soup. Mm-hmm.
You can love soup. You can agape soup.
Yeah.
So the first slice of this that we're going to take out of this is what Daniel has led us to, and that is to show that the term itself, agape, or the verb of that, agapeo, this is not the God kind.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only one you're going to see in relationship to God, but the fact of it is you can love anything.
Yeah.
It's not, and I'm like Daniel, I was just told that this agape is what God has toward us. Nothing else measures up to it. It is to nothing else, with nothing else, between nothing else, unless, you come into this magical place to where that you have this agape love for a person. But you can have agape for a steak.
Yeah. let me read you. This is a PhD, a Christian, and he's a Christian guy. His name is Mark Wood. He made this statement about agape. One of the most popular linguistic fallacies in modern times is that the Greek word for love, agapeo, carries in it the implication of a divine love that is unconditional and comes to us in spite of our sin. That is not true. Context must decide if agapeo refers to our proud, cliquish love for our cronies, or if it refers to God's merciful and sacrificial love for sinners, or if it refers to our love for leaders, not unconditionally, but precisely because of their labor. And it goes on to say about, just like you said, I mean, you can have a love, this term in the Koine Greek outside of the Bible is used in a way in old writings to refer to, it's almost a general term for love, because it can refer to a sexual type of love, which the Greek has a word for that called eros. It can refer to love for a good meal. Oh man, I love that pizza. That was really good. It can refer to a love that a man has for his wife. I really love you. A love that a man has for his children. So you see that this term is used in a wide range. It's almost a general term for love. So as this gentleman pointed out, is we really have to look at it and see that even biblically speaking, this term is used in a very general sense.
So it's not the deified word that modern Christianity has made it to be. It's actually the most common word for expressing affection, depending on what it is for.
Yeah.
The other thing that we found is now, Daniel, we've gone through a lot. We haven't gone through them all of both the agape and the agapeo. To this point, we have not found one single reference that uses this word in its subject that it is not transactional and conditional.
Right.
Every single place, agape and agapeo, that we have looked. Now we're asking you to help us here, because now there's altogether there's 220, maybe less than 220 of those two words. You'll have to look at the difference, the agape and the agapeo. Find us, please, a context where that word is used, that it is unconditional and transactional. See, we've bumped up against this in the work of the cross. So we have so many people that say that because it's the love of God, oh my God, you make the love of God transactional. And the cross is not true. They literally have concluded that the cross is not true because the love of God is not transactional.
Yeah.
So what they've done is redefine the scriptures and the cross by a modern day definition and emphasis on a word that does not mean ever biblically, extra biblically. It makes no difference. The word agape and agapeo, whoever said that this is the God kind of love, lied.
Right.
And the whole world believed it.
And I wrote a book on it.
And Daniel wrote a book. So, and the only reason we're not going to burn it is because we don't believe in book burning. We'll leave that heresy out there for people to be warned about. So our topic here is hot topic. Yes. Important, beyond imagination important. Because the cross itself has been dismantled by the love people. I love too, but I love pizza. And I love God. I love Daniel. I love Daniel's little girls. I know Daniel don't love me as much as he does his little girls. I'm dealing with it. But folks, this is a vitally important subject. And I've got some people in mind right now that are shutting this off right now because they can't handle what they're hearing.
Mm.
Please be strong. You have been told that the cross is not valid because it is a payment for sin. It is transactional. And you've been told that the presupposition for that position is that love is unconditional. Therefore, God had nothing to do with the cross because God's love is unconditional.
Mm.
Is that not a correct view of what you and I, our teachers, all taught for at least the last 100 years, Daniel?
Yeah, absolutely. It is.
Now we're finding people who are weaseling their way because of that incorrect teaching, accepting the definition and applying it against the subject and saying, therefore, your definition of the work of the cross is wrong. Now, the thing of it is, it's not our definition of the work of the cross.
Mm-hmm.
It is the scripture's definition of the work of the cross.
Yeah.
And as we look at its transactional and conditional, the thing that the transaction attempted, there was a transaction for righteousness that was attempted to be made between God and man.
Mm-hmm.
That righteousness was based in love. The transaction, man couldn't keep that covenant. Transaction denied.
Mm-hmm.
You ran your credit card, denied. The results was going to be righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness gracious. The conditions to meet that transaction were there in that covenant. Now, it does not say that because man could not meet the transactional nature of this covenant, that he could not meet that. Therefore, God just said, oh, well, no, that's not what God said.
Right.
God, because he loved us, God still needed this transactional, conditional thing to bring his righteousness into the earth. So he brings himself as a man into the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me that the cross is not a transactional work.
Yeah.
Of the love of God for the human race. And don't tell me that it was not conditional. The sacrifice had to be perfect. My God, if we went down through the conditions, the sacrifice had to be perfect. The priesthood that offered it had to be perfect. And we were given all kinds of types and shadows of that perfect priesthood, which could only be done in an outward form because it was not possible for the priesthood to be sanctified completely, but pertaining to the flesh, he was purified before he went in to offer an imperfect sacrifice, which did not take away sin. But the transaction, folks, the whole thing is extremely nothing but transactional.
Mm-hmm.
The transactions, the requirements for the transaction were not eradicated. They were fulfilled in Christ.
One of the verses that pops into my head is the very core of Christianity. For God so loved, agapeo, for God so loved the world that he gave. So there's a transaction. God had love, and so there was a giving. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever, here comes a condition, that whosoever believeth on him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Let me give you one more and then I'll make some comments. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. And I will ask the Father, and he'll give you another helper, the Holy Spirit, who will be with you forever. If you love me, if you have agape for me, then you will obey my commandments. And then the transaction, I will pray the Father after you keep my commandments, and he'll give you the helper. What do we know here at the Gospel Revolution? Number one, nobody could keep the commandments.
Yep.
Number two, nobody had any faith to believe, except for the Christ. When he came in, he fulfilled the commandments, and he came in faith. It was by the faith of the Son of God that we live. And so these things were completed. There was a requirement, there was a condition, there was a transaction that took place. And in both of these, it's not fulfilled by us, our ability to believe or our ability to love him and keep his commandments, but rather we got the Holy Spirit in spite of us being able to keep the commandments. We got everlasting life in spite of being able to believe. Why? Because God dealt this transaction through his Son, Jesus Christ, the only person, the only man who could come to earth and meet the conditions.
Precisely. Now, I want to take you back a few years when we were dealing with this, me and Don Bartlett. And Don was trying to help us through this. And we were being confronted with love is not transactional. But you see, Don was taught that love is not pure love is not transactional. It has no conditions. And so the way that Don gave me, and I used it and I upheld it until Daniel came along and we delved into this instead of just taking the bait. But Don started saying, I no longer see the view of the cross as transactional, but a fulfillment of. And I bought into that too. I started saying that because I had no way to answer these people like Kay Fairchild and Mirror Bible and Andre Rabe and Don Keithley, because they were all saying that this was unconditional love. And you have to look through the lens of love. Well, there's a whole lot that is true and a whole lot that's wrong with that about what you're blinded to if you look through a lens. A lens can give you greater clarity about what you're looking at specifically, but it can also blind you to everything else around you. So we're really hoping that you'll throw away all of your lenses. Temporarily, if you want to look at something closely, we're kind of using the lens now, but we are using the lens to go in and study this very particular subject. And instead of going from my God, the whole world swallowed this. And there is no place that we can find that love, that the term agape means unconditional, and that it is unconditional and there's no transaction. It's not transactional. In fact, what we found is it is always conditional and it is always transactional.
Yeah.
The power of the work of the cross is knowing who met the transactional requirements. The power of the gospel is in knowing who met the transactional and conditional requirements for love.
That's good.
It is not, you will never know the love of God by dismissing the transactional and conditional requirements of love. You'll never know the gospel.
Yeah.
You'll never know the gospel at all if you don't accept the transactions and the agreements for that transaction being met.
Mm.
I have never been more happy to break through something because, Daniel, for more than a decade, this has been a fog for me. It's like, well, I kind of see what they're saying, but see, the problem was, see, things can become so established as common truth that are absolute lies, that we will form everything that we think around a lie and think that we are wallowing in truth.
Yeah.
I know we say this a lot, but this is one of the most important gospel revolution sessions that you will ever hear. And I do want to thank again your aunt for inspiring us and requesting that we go into this subject.
Yeah.
Because without her, we would never have done it. Why am I saying that? Because that's what we want you to do. If you think you know something, let us know what it is. And if you want to ask us questions, now, if you don't want to ask us questions, that's fine. But we're asking you to be brave, just like Pat has been, and ask us this question. Now, she knows about love. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to know about the love of God. But here is something that I don't think anybody's ever known about the love of God in my life and in my circles. Everybody, up to the phone calls I've had before this week.
Mm-hmm.
I and they, all of my phone buddies that I talk with, we would have said that God's love is unconditional.
Yeah.
It got to us without condition.
Right.
Because the conditions and the transaction was fulfilled by another man, not us.
Yeah.
It had to be a man. It had to be a man to fulfill the requirements of the transaction. And my God, suddenly the gospel, the entire Hebrew scriptures fling wide open for you. And you see that perfect priesthood. You see that perfect sacrifice. You see that perfect law of love. You see the perfection of obedience. You see the perfection of righteousness that was all fulfilled transactionally up on the cross.
And again, as we've been talking about this personal Jesus, this is maybe the apex of personal Christianity, is this love that I have towards God, or this love that I show towards one another in order to fulfill the great commandment, in order to fulfill this. But as we back up here and as we see that truly the only one who could meet that condition was the Christ, and I want to point that out again, Michael, that statement you made about the Christ here now 2 weeks ago, that the Christ was not a personal, the disciples walked with Jesus, but it was the Christ who was the world redeemer. And it was the Christ who reconciled all of the world to himself. And it wasn't a personal Jesus. It wasn't a personal relationship that the disciples had with him.
And they had it. They had a personal relationship.
They absolutely had it. Yeah. But it was the Christ. And in the same way, this Christ, this transaction that the Christ did, it was the transaction that met all of the conditions in order for the redemption of the world. I'll give you a statement Michael said to me last night as we were going through this. He said that the redemption of the world, the reconciliation of the world, was transactional and conditional. And I tell you what, that'll set your religious hairs on fire.
I'm telling you, I was shocked at myself when we were able to conclude that. But see, what's happening in this external, hyper superficial world of spirituality, of Christianity, they have raised some important points, but failed to do their homework. And I failed to do my homework.
Mm-hmm.
But I want you to see how powerful it is that all you have to do is get somebody to accept a conclusion about something, that the conclusion is completely wrong. Therefore, the corrections for that or the estimations about that are subsequently all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
All of them are wrong.
Yeah.
By making the statement that the term agape and agapeo, the noun and the verb, means unconditional, is a lie.
Mm. Even when it comes to God. Michael, let me read a verse here that shows this, that paints this picture. This is John chapter 10, Jesus saying, I'm the sheep, or I'm the shepherd, I'm the good shepherd. He makes a statement in John 10:17. Therefore does my Father love me, because there's a reason, there's a condition that Christ met that allows God to love him. Therefore does my Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I might take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down myself. I have the power to lay it down, and I have the power to take it again. This commandment have I received from my Father. So the reason that God extended love toward his son, his own son, was because he laid down his life.
Because of his obedience.
Because of his obedience.
Now, you can take that out of there, I guess, if you want to. You can throw the whole Bible away if you want to. You can throw away the Hebrew scriptures. You can throw away the need for the cross, because it has indeed been done.
Mm-hmm.
And now the Bible and the scriptures are nothing but a reference point to find something out of context to prove that you are right.
Mm. And now what Christianity has done is they have, again, ignored the story, ignored this process, ignored this transaction that took place, and now put the onus back on believers and unbelievers to believe, to love, to do this in order to fulfill these things. But again, what we have seen is that these conditions were met by Christ. This transaction took place by Christ. And now there is nothing. And I think Michael said that it has come to us personally, unconditionally, but it came through the transaction and the conditions that Christ met.
Yeah, and it's getting this all turned upside down that causes us then to feel like we're in some transactional relationship, personal transactional relationship with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true. It's very interesting now that we look back on it. Jesus was asking his disciples, who do men say that I am? Some say Elias.
Mm-hmm.
Some say you're John the Baptist come back to life again. And I don't remember all of them that they said there, Daniel. But then Peter said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now, Jesus' response there is vitally important, because it is either the establishment of Catholicism and Christianity, or it is not the establishment of Catholicism and Christianity. When we went through that and we read through it, and it says, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I shall build my church. So what is stated out of there is the word Peter means rock. So we take the English word rock then, and say, therefore, Jesus said, I'm going to build my entire church on one disciple. There's a problem. The word Peter is one Greek word, and the word rock is a completely different Greek word. Jesus did not say he was going to build his church on a man called Peter. He would build his church upon the revelation of who the Christ is.
Yeah.
That understanding of Christ, not Jesus, not the man they had a personal, and here it took Peter. Peter said, only God can reveal that to somebody. And of course, we know that was what Jesus was saying. This was before the cross. I don't know if it takes God himself to reveal that to people now. All you have to do is know the gospel, and you know that Jesus is the Christ. But we are beginning to delve into more about this term, as Daniel has shared with you, about the Christ. I told Daniel, I thought Christ was Jesus's last name, Just like I'm Michael Williams. It's like, well, which one are you, Michael or Williams? It's the same,
Right.
But that's not true, because they knew Jesus, but even Jesus himself was pointing out that not just that this man Jesus, the son of Mary and Joseph, but who do men say that I am? Now, it's going to be interesting to go back and look and see what those words all mean. But the one thing that we can tell you for sure here in the Gospel Revolution, here on this date in June, in 2024, is that Jesus did not say he was going to build his church up on the guy Peter. It's a totally different Greek word. And that is the church is, how stupid to think, just stupid, number one. But it shows you how willing we are to put our trust in what men and their experiences are. Because those two words are completely different. And the rock of revelation and understanding of Christ is not Peter. That's for sure. Because the term that's about Peter is literally, that word describes somebody that's kind of hard-headed, actually. It describes somebody that doesn't always get it. In fact, if you look at through Peter's history, I think Jesus may have stood there saying, wow, you're the one that got it. But because every time that Jesus told Peter something, it took him 3 times to say it to Peter. And then even when Peter was told it 3 times, he went back to the disciples and told them the wrong thing.
One might say hard-headed.
So, yes, and thou art hard-headed. But upon the revelation of what you just said, that I am the Christ, that is what the church is going to be built on, and has been and was. It is the issue of the Christ, not the Jesus of the Christ. Now, Mike, you're splitting hairs. He's Jesus Christ. I know that. But you do have to pull things apart to look at them separately to see how they function jointly. That's just all there is to it. That's the way you do it. That's the way anatomy's done. You went from the very onset of the research and studies of anatomy. They had to take things apart to look to see how that they work. Leg's a leg, right? But what are ligaments? What are veins? What are arteries? Well, they had to start looking inside to see what those were. And then when it's all over, a leg's a leg, right?
Yeah. So as you go through the New Testament specifically, and you look at these words, the love, agape, agapeo, just watch the transition that takes place. I think Ephesians is a great place to go, because you go in there and you see it that he accepted us in the beloved. That is that verb, agape. We were accepted into love. this love in which we were loved. Christ has also loved us. Go through these things. But then all of a sudden in chapter 5, husbands got to love their wives. You got to love this way. You got to love that way. And all of a sudden we have now made this love about what we can do rather than what Christ has done. And you can see that progression all throughout the New Testament. You look at James, you look at John, you look at Peter, and though they each kind of reference the love of Christ a little bit, the majority of it is that we need to love people. Peter even says to love the brotherhood, and we know that that is specifically in Peter's teaching, that is to love the Jewish people.
So here we go. We've not looked though, Daniel, at our our standard, and that is to go back and look at the Hebrew scriptures. I just typed in love here, and I'm going back, and I happen to notice that the love your neighbor as yourself is shows up in Leviticus, and that's Leviticus 19. And you guys didn't know how to say that before I told you. And the word here for love, thou shalt love, and let's just see how many times this word shows up. I think this is the only term for the word love in the Hebrew. Let's see. It shows up as 195 times as that word.
So that's Ahab,
Yes.
157, and then there's 160, which is kind of it's the same word, but it's the feminine.
Well, the word Ahab, Abe, I think is the way it would be pronounced. It means to have affection for, sexual or otherwise.
So again, another general.
Like a friend, a loved one. So this is not agape. There is no agape type of defined Christianity. The deception of Christianity around the world about love is also not in the Hebrew scriptures.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, you kind of get the same thing. You get the same.
Yeah.
And I did read that when this Ahab and what was the other one? Ahab and Ahabaha. When those two were used, agape in the Septuagint would have been the equivalent word that they would have used.
They brought that into the word agape then.
Yeah.
As the equivalent in the Septuagint.
Yeah.
All right.
And as you look through these, you see there are many references outside of what Christianity has said, the God kind of love, that Esau loved the soup.
Yeah. And Isaac loved Esau because he did eat his venison. Okay.
Yeah.
You love my soup, you love me.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't love my soup, you don't love me. Folks, we really, I hate to be silly as Daniel and I are sometimes with such a serious subject, but I don't know of any other way to handle this. This is tragedy that has happened around the world.
Mm-hmm.
You've been sold a lie. You've been told that there was an agape love that is separate from all other kinds of love, that is not transactional, and it's not conditional.
Yep.
And the Bible does not contain that word in it.
Mm.
Hebrew scriptures, New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, none of the other writers, Revelation, Jesus, nobody knows that word that controls the mind of the average Christian. and every other religion around the world.
Right.
This is a mind control over every religion on the planet Earth because they all accept that love is, I guarantee you, if you ask Buddhist, if you ask Hindu, if you ask anyone in Islam, they'll tell you that love is, the love of God is unconditional love.
So here's a question in my mind, and maybe it's a silly question, but does God love us in the present, or did God love us in the past? So is God's love fulfilled in Christ? I don't know if you get my question. Is this love kind of an active thing right now? Is God have an active sort of love towards people? Or was that love demonstrated, completed, and fulfilled in the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ? And, certainly we could say God loves us, but is that something that's being active today? Or is that something that's fulfilled in Christ?
Well, let's look at it. If it's active today, it would be transactional today. The best that we can tell.
Right.
If it was fulfilled, then it is the only thing you can do is say thank you, right?
Right.
Because the conditions have been met completely, and the transaction was accepted. You won't see transaction declined. It's transaction was accepted. I don't know. You say, well, why does this make, for me, this makes the cross more powerful than I understood it to be.
Right.
Because, and then it's strange for us, the cross gets more and more and more and more powerful. And for our colleagues, it gets less and less and less and less powerful or needful or relevant at all.
Mm-hmm.
The person of Christ has become irrelevant himself. Gosh, I hope that someone does like what your Aunt Pat has done and takes this show and asks some other people to listen to this and critique it. Because that's what needs to be done. I mean, not just Aunt Pat, all of you guys. If you know somebody, goodness, I would love for Kay Fairchild to listen to this and critique it. Show us where that this is wrong. And see, a lot of people think that term critique is negative. And we don't have, because it's number one, we don't have doctrines, which that's that's another thing. It's just these words that we use and don't use to try to validate the way that we prefer to think. Does a human being prefer to think that God was never angry? I would think that a human being would prefer to think that God was never angry. The issue is not whether my preferences are being respected, or is that the truth? I mean, which one do you want? And sometimes your preferences are indeed honored by the scriptures. But you've got to accept that sometimes your preferences are not honored by. In fact, sometimes your preferences are completely disqualified. Thus, it becomes a point of changing your mind. So, again, to 1 Corinthians, when you critique something, you're doing what Paul did with every stroke of the pen.
Yeah.
I can't find where he was not critiquing, where he was not comparing, and even shamed the people at Corinth for not being able to compare and know the difference between. So, and we are called non-loving because we do this. I can't think of anything more loving in the world than to show you for the first time what the scriptures actually say about love. If you're sitting there and you've listened to this, and you have always thought that love was the agape was the unconditional love of God, you need to write out a check for as big as you can and send it in for the pledge drive. Because you just learned one of the most valuable, and I'm telling you, this is so valuable. You must understand the transactional and conditional love of God that came to man through the work of the cross. When that is dismissed and you try to work unconditional around that, you don't know what love is.
Mm-hmm.
But don't you see all of these little it's like having a beautiful mansion with little rat holes everywhere that rats are getting in,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't stop the rats getting in because you don't know where the rat holes are.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is finding the holes.
Right.
And if this isn't one of the biggest rat holes in all of the understanding of the gospel and all religions around the world, is to find that what the Hebrew scriptures say. I'd like to know how the Quran defines love,
Mm-hmm.
because I know it includes a lot of the Old Testament, or at least I'm told that. I remember getting a Quran and reading some in it. I don't remember now; it's been so many years. But show us where that unconditional love is defined by the word agape.
Mm.
And if they have come up with a word that means unconditional love, I'd like to know what it is.
Just did a quick search on the Quran definition of love, and it says true love is part of God's love, and it is our duty to love one another truly as he indeed loves us. Without divine love, there can be no human love.
And what is divine love?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's so arbitrary. It's just unbelievable. The misunderstanding of this word has led to. Now, you got to understand that the people who led the Crusades, who murdered, disemboweled, and all of these things. Now, see, it's really funny that we mention those things, and nobody in the Christian world likes to admit that.
Mm-hmm.
But they will reject that, and then on the other hand, especially with Christians, goodness, they rejoice over the wrath of God in the Old Testament. But then we have the other group that don't see the transition from the Old Covenant to the New Covenant.
Right.
And telling people, you explain to me the difference between the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New. They are not the same. Well, you're exactly right. Because the God of the Old Testament was the God over a creation. The God of the New Testament was the God, the Father of the firstborn, his Son, Christ. Christ Jesus, or Jesus Christ. Now I don't know if it's his first name or his last name. So they are different, but they are two different relationships. Daniel, my life has changed. There's always this haunting thing in the back of many people's heads, as if, am I loving? And people know that I've been questioning this for a long time. And I finally surrendered and said, I don't even know if I love at all.
Mm.
Compared to what I'm told love is, I kind of think I don't got it. At least I became honest with myself about it. Wow. We've got a lot to learn, folks.
Mm-hmm.
And we do appreciate what you do. We'll keep doing what we do, but please ask us questions. Please, please. When we do these, we do as thorough of a job as we can. But for those of you that have a little computer, I use Power Bible. All you have to do is type it in search, and you can buy Power Bible. It is so easy. It really is very user friendly. And if the The only thing that I had a problem with was the transaction of buying it. And, but there's an 800 number on there. And these people answer, I think they're sitting in their living room, quite honestly, the people who have this. And it cost, what was it, $7 or something?
Yeah,
Daniel?
I think something like that.
And they'll process it for you and make sure it's up and running on your computer for you. It's very good service. Please get this. It's a wonderful tool. All of this is laid out for you. You get to see everything in the Greek, in the Hebrew. You get to see how many different Bibles is on this. So you get to select your Bible. Now, let me save you some time. All of the helps and commentaries are set up in conjunction with the King James Version. So you're not going to get the Greek or anything out of the others. But goodness, there's more than 25 here. There's Young's Literal. There's Weymouth's. All of them that you've heard about. That there's the Montgomery's New Testament, the New King James. There's some heretics that use that thing.
Me.
There's an LGB. That's Lutheran's German, and it's going to be in German. And so if you read German, you can even go on there and read that. There's Darby's. There's Bible in Basic English, American Standard Version, and of course, the one authorized by God Himself, King James.
Wow. Well, this has been a learning experience, and I look forward, to the feedback that we get from this. And as we kind of just open the door on this topic again, and I think there's a lot more to be learned here. And I'm also excited about understanding of the Christ a little bit more as we progress forward.
Me too. And let me say this as we close. I think I have seen unconditional love. I think I have felt it. It felt unconditional until he made me mad. Isn't it amazing how unconditional that love is when the couple's standing there and I thee wed, and it's just, and 55% of them end up hating each other. It's like, is unconditional love possible? Yes. And now we live in an environment where there is no condition between God and man in His love, but His love has already been demonstrated. There's nothing that God's love can do. Herein lies the personal Lord, personal Savior. You're still waiting on God's love to do something for you.
Yeah.
And you want it done, and you want it unconditionally. And as you've been told that it comes unconditionally, but then look at all the things you try to meet the condition. Why do people get so angry at God when their mother's diagnosed with cancer, their child is hit by a car? Why do they get so angry? Because they believe in unconditional love.
Wow.
And because of that precondition, that's one thing, gosh, you should be upset if your child got hit by a car. But getting angry at God is very revealing as to a flaw in our entire belief system, for sure. I'm convinced that I have seen unconditional love. I've watched people care for others. I think that most people can love their pets unconditionally based on the way their pets act right now. I think that one of the reasons people love pets is because that's probably one of the least, or at least you're in control of the transaction. You don't wait for the dog to fix your breakfast in the morning.
Right.
But the dog's affection for you is completely transactional.
Mm.
So, oh no, not my dog. No, you tried. No, don't do that. I'd have the ASPCA down. No, wait a minute. I get all my acronyms mixed up. So anyway, I am not going to sign off here saying there is no such thing as unconditional love. What I am going to sign off here saying is that it is not in the Bible. Unless you can prove us wrong. The love that God demonstrated to us through the cross was both conditional and transactional. Clearly. And the transaction was made, the conditions were met, and the love of God was bestowed upon the entire earth in a gift called righteousness. Conditions met, transaction made, and Jesus is Lord.
And so it is we must leave you, family and friends. If you'd like to know anything about the gospel revolution or want to prove us wrong, then call our office on.
Or give us money, 832-318-9339.
Or you can call Jeff at 321-220-4373 and make that pledge today. Or you can also go to gospelrevolution.com and hit the donate button. You can find us on your favorite social media network, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We got choices for you. Please be sure to hit that subscribe, share, and like button on whatever platform you are listening. Now it's a good night and a big I love you from the frozen tundra.
And same from Michael Lilborn Williams. And, I'm not going to deny we may love some of you a little more than the others. Depends on how the pledge drive goes.
Depends on them transactions.
I hope we're better than that. I think we are because I spend just as much. Let me qualify my love now. I spend just as much time on the phone with people who give little to nothing as I do who give much. So, and maybe I'm just trying to prove something. I don't know. So. I don't know anything anymore.
Well, we sure hope that you enjoyed today's Powercast. And remember, we'll be here to do the same thing all over again next week, only
no such thing as unconditional love. Better.
Since you're knocking on the door, you're begging to come in, yeah. Unaware that all the while love's been knocking from within. You are the love you see, a perfect yet unique, righteous, holy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. When you feel lost and alone, staring at the unknown, and these words be the cause that guides you back home. We are one, we are love, we are. Know where you gotta be, nothing to complete. It's not a thing that you need, you're the love. Just remember to breathe and take a second off. Look, I'm just trying to remind you that you're perfectly divine, flawlessly designed. When you're lost and alone, staring at the unknown, let these words be the compass that guides you back home. We are one, we are love, we are. Yeah, yeah. We are love.
Deconstructing religion and barbecuing the sacred cows of Christianity before your very eyes. You are listening to
The Gospel Revolution.